Atlanta when I attended the First Q, to see that there are different expressions of church and that what Christ has been doing in the body, in raising up new expressions of churches. And one part of the story I can share a little bit having to do with our own journey in giving birth to a church, and Gaylord can share a little bit about his experience, because I think it's been, how long has it been? My mind is drawing a blank.
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. That's Ted, our English pastor from WACC before, and Ted is now a church planting pastor. And an independent. Now he is now with the Evangelical Covenant Church and planning a new church. And in that journey, when I remember when Ted came, because we have good friendship and we're always able to talk about things and our dreams, and so when, I still remember when the first time I kind of sensed that maybe Ted may not stay around at our church very, very long. I mean, he was already there for a good number of years, but then I sensed that where God is leading his heart and his passion. And we discussed about what are some possibilities that we could do this in terms of reaching the next generation, which we're both frustrated with, that somehow we're experiencing certain difficulties in reaching. And we explored different possibilities. You know, could we do this on Sunday evening? Could we, if we rebrand our ministry, could we do this? If we, you know, what were some possibilities? And some possibilities we tried, and some we just kind of experimented in our minds, and we just thought, nah, I don't think that's going to work. And so in that journey, long story short, I'm just grateful for a couple things. The first thing is I'm grateful for my friendship with Ted and just his humility and his transparency in terms of sharing with me, so that I would not lie to say at no time did I feel, you know, at times I feel scared. I was scared, you know, what this is going to go, where is this going to? But I felt like our friendship and our open communication was key to the fact that I felt like this is something that the Lord wanted Ted to do, and we want to kind of support him. And what made it even harder was that the key leaders that may be involved in this endeavor, some of them were youth that I had taught at WACC, and I would say they're like kind of my pride and joy in the church. You know, some of them are serving our church council, and to me, that's like, you know, that's kind of my babies. You know, they're the people that if you want to ask me what are some of the things I'm most proud of, we'll be pointing to some of those people. And then going to the elders, we'll talk about this when I got Ted to speak to the elders. The second thing I'm just really grateful for is how our elders. Again, they were a little surprised too. Were able to walk with us through that process and prayerfully talking through. Along the way, there were many other things. I got a chance to consult other pastors about their experiences. But one of the things I felt like the Lord laid upon my heart was that I want to make sure that we could do this right, that we won't hurt people in the process, and that the Lord be honored in that process. We didn't know what we're up against or doing. We had a chance to meet with the denomination that Ted was interested in, Evangelical Covenant Church. We're a non-denominational church. Our elders met with the leaders from the denomination to see, you know, whether this is something we can work with. Our church is also engaging in church planting on our own in a different type of endeavor, and so. But anyway, you know, we were thankful for how our church were able to be used by God to give birth to a new expression of church, and one of the things I don't think it's just an explanation for our leaders, was also for myself, and an example I talked to our leaders is that, you know, if you're running a business and your whole dream is that hoping that one day your children would inherit and keep running your business, but then when that time comes and they come to you and say, Dad, this business is great, but I want to start my own business. Now I would say, you know, how would you feel about that? You know, I think there would be certainly maybe a sense of disappointment, but I think at the same time there will also be a great sense of pride to know that, you know, listen, they want to start their own business just like you did, And so I'm very grateful. It's a long story, but long story short, our church, we were able to get our elders to support it. We're going to our church council. I remember that was one of the hardest council meetings we've ever had, where people were very open, people wept and talked about this, because there were people who have gone through church split situations before, and they want to understand, is there story behind the story that they weren't being given the full scoop to. And but 2 years ago, we commissioned Ted and about 40 leaders from our church, in partnership with Evangelical Covenant Church, to start a new church. In a way, I don't know, there may be many different stories of how ethnic church will continue, but we feel like we still have a mission to English-speaking ministry. We're still trying to, and this process actually is challenging us to rethink about how can we sharpen our vision, and what Ted and his team are trying to reach the next generation, whom we think that we have a hard time to reach, just being the ethnic church that we are. But we're also asking, okay, then what will be our English ministry look like, and what do we need to do? And we're still in a process on that. We're working on that. So I thought maybe Gaylord can share a little bit about your process as well, because I think this process we're seeing in quite a bit of Texas churches, that we're kind of seeing this, of young leaders are looking at whether there are other expressions of church in reaching their own generation.
I'd like to just preface my sharing about it by saying the key that I have observed is the relationship of the leaders. Leadership in and of itself is very important and lacking in many areas, but you can have top-notch leaders, and if they don't like each other, or there's not a commitment or a trust, or in this case, a Christ-centeredness, it'll just explode. You'll have church splits, you'll have bad feelings, you'll have families torn because parents are still on one and children on the other. So that's the thing that as I look back, I feel like it's been a blessing God has given to us. And I guess just even sitting here today is a little surreal, because Liquid was our college ministry. Even rewinding a little bit more, we had our senior pastor come, met his son, and within a year or so we convinced him to come down. And so Gideon came down from Detroit, just really start up our youth and our college ministries. It took off. It got to the point literally that the college ministry, Liquid, could not fit on our campus anymore. So they had to actually come to UT campus. And then as that was going, we realized that, well, what are we going to do? It wasn't like we had a master plan. And God just sort of, I think our leadership, as they tried to understand what they were seeing, and couldn't quite comprehend, and it didn't quite fit into their grid, but yet there was a trust level, and there was a willingness to let go of things, and there'd be ups and downs. I don't want to lie about that, but overall there was a blessing, and at the point it got to, okay, well, let's plant Liquid as a church, and need to be rebranded, because at the time it was just a college ministry, and there was much more that God had in store, it seemed like. So changed to Vox Venier. Some of our leaders still can't say it right, but Vox Venier, is something that they couldn't figure out by name, but in concept they're like, okay, even though we don't understand it, our deacon board and stuff said, okay, well, we'll plant this church. Now, we had never done church planting, so we're just bumbling through it all, and I think God just sort of covered a lot of things. I would like to affirm the staff here, because they actually waited longer than they could have. I think in many ways there are sometimes like, hey, can we go now? But they waited until there was this blessing from the ACC leadership. And I think it's really key. So Vox it's in its fourth year, right? Well, 3.5, something like that. So it's just been going in many ways on its own. Tomorrow night we have what we call a Vox Oversight Board meeting, which is really the excuse for 3 people from our church to get together, 3 people from their church, and have coffee. But just to share blessings on both sides. And they're growing up, and I like the analogy that David had used. But what we realized is stylistically we're very different, extremely different. People from Vox probably would never go to ACC, and vice versa. That's not a right or wrong. It's as long as the message of Jesus Christ is pure and unadulterated, then great. We had 1 year we didn't have a college ministry, and that was tough. But we didn't have our ducks lined up at the time, so there was about a year we didn't have any college students. And then finally some leaders said, okay, we'll sort of shepherd this. And they were lay people, so we had about 15 that year. And then the next year we had about 30, and this year we're around 50. And it's just neat how God just sort of said, okay, if you're willing to let go, church leaders, if you're willing to plant this church and bless them and help sponsor them as they go out, I'll take care of you guys. Because there was a lot of fear, like, oh, who's going to take care of our college kids? God will. It just might not look like we thought originally it would look like. And so we also found out that some college students that didn't want one style were really great with another style. So as we had conversations, well, let's leverage how God has made us. Let's leverage the way we're wired or the style that we have. And not condemn the other one. We bless the other one, but we're not apologizing for who we are, how God made us. And I think that's been healthy for both sides. So again, that trust relationship is crucial. And who knows what's going to happen next. We're still learning. And one last thing I've really appreciated, in our church we have a couple of staff members from some parachurch organizations that are not only attending, but they're members of our church. They're part of our small groups. And parachurch organizations already have all these meetings, and yet they're part of our church. And I see this coming year as a time where we can even grow more, where the parachurch and church are appreciating each other's strengths and leveraging it, and together reaching people for Christ. So, sky's the limit.
All right, thanks, guys. You guys stay here. So I think we wanted them to share this story because it's a very local expression and practical example of two people in leadership from a different generation. Can I say that? Who have birthed and are raising up leaders, and this was something practical that they went through. And in the story, you don't really capture kind of the ins and outs and the birthing pains that come with it. But we wanted to thank them for just sharing their story. So, does anyone have any questions related specific to this?
You guys had a conference or seminar last year. You guys got all the pastors together from the English side, the church, Chinese churches. Can you share a little bit, like, some of the conclusions? Sure.
Oh, well, there is a fellowship of churches here, Chinese churches in Texas. I think it used to be 12 churches. I think it's a little bit more now. That the goal is to, and we usually just do a couple of retreats. And so one of the things that we've been thinking more strategically about this is that how can we improve the soil for English ministry? And so the two things we've done, one is that we retreat, another retreat that we've done over a couple of years now is trying to raise up people with a heart for ethnic church English-speaking ministry called Render, which basically, there's a lot of missions conference, the challenge people to go into parachurch and all that, and so we thought we want to cast a vision for the church. And then out of that conversation, actually, I think Gideon and some others have posed that question to us at one year, and they said that even if you could get people who want to go into and serve in an ethnic church, which in general is more difficult because you're dealing with true culture and all that, if the church themselves are not healthy, why bother? And so the question was raised among us to see what is something that we could do tangibly to perhaps improve the soil. Okay, so people have a fighting chance in that, and so. We started what we call a legacy dialogue, which is regionally based. We didn't want to invite speakers. We just thought it's just we invited Chinese pastors and Chinese congregation leaders, first generation leaders, to come together to discuss the issues of English ministry. We felt like sometimes when your own pastor, with your own staff telling you about these things, people, okay. So, but you need some other people to tell you that. So, and so we've been grateful that, that at least our first trial run on that I thought was somewhat successful. A number of Chinese leaders came out, and we were talking about, again, not a news to anyone, the whole issue of the exodus of Asian Americans from the ethnic churches. And so, and we're going to do another one this fall. And so that's something I want to invite you to pray for. But it's an ongoing dialogue, and really I felt like we were being challenged because this kind of dialogue very easily turned into a very negative venting thing, and we felt like if that comes out, then it could really destroy any atmosphere of dialogue and listening, because we felt like Chinese first generation leader could easily go into a defensive posture and felt like, oh, this is just, this kind of, they're coming after us. But what we really want to do is really reaching out to communicate. And so,
Yeah, I think it worked well because we tried to respect them, and yet still let them share with them what everybody knew, that people were leaving. And then what happened was in Dallas we did it, about 50 or so came, and in Houston we did it again, and about 50 or so pastors and leaders came, first generation. So that was, and they all left with pretty positive. Some of them wanted a quick fix, which there's not any, but at least they're open and they're interested in doing more. So that was.
Thank you. And I think maybe just maybe what speaks to this is how many of us actually grew up with an experience in an ethnic immigrant church? Just show of hands. Okay. How many of us are actually in an immigrant ethnic church now in leadership? And so this is the exact dynamic that Dave and Gaylord are wrestling with. And I feel like it's so important because we can't just ignore the history and the legacy that paved the way for us. So what does it look like then to birth new things, which a lot of us are a part of, but to do it hand in hand with people who are still trying to raise up leaders? And I feel like that conversation and those questions are really important. So, any final words?
I just think that I came to this conference actually piggybacking off the conference to be here because I felt like I need to continue to learn and continue to hear about what Spirit is doing in emerging churches. And I know that a lot of times God uses a discontent with where we're at in order to raise up new things, which I think is part of God's way. But the thing I appreciate from emerging church leaders and people who are involved in the movement would be, continue to pray for ethnic church, because I think I really still believe that they still play an important role in what God is doing. And the other part is that in our dialogue, to help encourage, because I think, again, it's easy for critiques to go in only negative directions, and it's easy to point out, I think, the many flaws of say ethnic congregations and church structures and leadership. I don't mean for people to gloss over their flaws, but I think God uses different kind of churches to accomplish different things, and I believe we need each other in that. So yeah, that's the only thing, to be mindful of that, because I feel there's still very much an uphill battle in that, and the feeling of sometimes when our group gather together, and I feel our group isn't as well networked as say emerging leaders. It is that there's always this feeling like, man, our ranks are really thinning out, and it's very easy to become kind of getting down on that. And so I feel even your prayer and encouragement for that, to recognize that, because I personally think God is always in the work of raising up new work as well as reviving His work. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks you guys. Let's give them a hand. And their work for, I know specifically Gaylord and Dave, just the bullets that are taken and their leadership and the sacrifices they make to choose to serve in the ethnic immigrant church. I respect that a whole lot, and we need you guys. Thanks for what you're doing. The second presenter, we have a huge honor. We have Jerry Park, who teaches sociology at Baylor. And he's just up the road. He's been teaching there 5 years. And so he's going to offer a perspective of Asian American leadership from a more academic standpoint and what's going on there. So let's give him a hand, and the mic is yours.
Thanks, Gideon, and thanks to everybody here who helped support and